I'm sitting here raging out to myself, and I realized, dude, you have a show. Just go on your show. Um, those people right now, they're beginning to give charges to the various people who had ran in the Capitol, basically ransacked the Capitol, who attacked the Capitol and scared the living bejesus out of various members of Congress who typically are removed and detached from the American experience. And in that one moment, they were no longer removed. The Americans that they make bills for and that they pass laws for and that they stamp this or that and they press a button about in this and that. And these things have consequences in the larger world and particular consequences in America, either for better or for worse. And yet they are utterly and entirely distinct and removed from the people to which they make those rules for. Now, if you are distinct and removed from something, what kind of rules, what kind of laws, what is your frame of reference in comparison to the people to which you are distinct and removed from? And if you are distinct and removed, should you indeed be making laws and rules for those people? In that one brimming moment of fear and terror, they were at once touched by their fellow Americans. Again, the fellow Americans that they're making rules for. And if indeed those fellow Americans are that pissed off and cantankerous, is it possible that you are doing something that wasn't necessarily on the up and up for those fellow Americans? And I know some people could say, well, dude, Trump pushed those people to do that. And yes, I would agree with you that Trump pushed those people to do that, but I would make the point that the fact that Trump was in office in the very first place is the issue. And Trump was in that office in the first place because the political system had utterly and entirely found itself to be a failure. Do you honestly believe? Be above it all for a moment. Take yourself out of yourself. Stop. Don't do the political nonsense of red and blue for the moment. Just be an honest actor and look at Trump. And think for yourself about the people who you would ideally want to make rules and laws and everything else. You want those people on some level to have an experience that gives them a feel for what it is like to be an actual fucking person and to retain that experience of what it is like to be an actual fucking person as they move through the political process and as they get to a particular position of authority and have a position and a point of view that is in the best interest of the public itself as they're making rules and laws that is cutting one way or the other. At least that's in my head. I wouldn't want that person to be well-rounded. I would want that person to have a context of not just our country, but of the world. I would want a well-rounded fucking individual that has a certain degree of understanding of reality. Trump checks no buttons for me on any of that. He is incompetent. Not just incompetent in a way that is self-centered, petty, egotistical, and will take action that is specific to self, regardless of the fact of the people it hurts. All of those things were on display when he was in office. And the unfortunate fucking part is that is mainly the particular politicians that we have, typically, with one exception of intelligence, usually, unfortunately, being used against the public, that's associated with the person. My point is, Donald Trump doesn't get into office unless the political system has utterly and entirely failed. And in the context of the political system utterly and entirely failed, there are consequences that extend from that. It's not enough to say, well, Donald Trump did X. Yes, Donald Trump did X, but understand why he is in an office. And the consequences or the reasons for it is the thing that I'm pointing to here and making the point of saying, yes, that failure is the issue. The falling apart is the problem. When those people ran on the Capitol, if they raided the Capitol, and they raided the Capitol for a reason of, hey, 600,000 people died. 600,000 people died. And we don't believe, as the public, that you are responding to that. And we, black, white, red, LGBTQ, everything in between, are here angry to petition for our grievances. And we are raiding this fucking Capitol, the public house. I would have been on my platform cheering them on. Yes! Do it! Do it! Sack that office! Sack that fucking office. That's where I would have been. But that's not what happened. Instead, they're screaming, Trump, 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 as they go about beating the shit out of cops. And again, raiding the Capitol. And they're going to go to jail for that. And I'm going to applaud all of them, including the grandmothers, going to jail for that. He had a stupid reason. The reason matters. Infinitely so. I see right now, Joe Biden has just made an agreement with the Republican Senate. And because Joe Biden wants to be bipartisan as the highest aspiration of things, it's like, hey, Joe, in order for you to get this deal, I need to have sex with your wife. I need to bend Jill Biden over and I'm going to bang the fuck out of her. That is the terms of my agreement. Do you want to be bipartisan or not, Joe? What do you want to do? Are you going to hand Jill over and get your deal or not? Now, Joe Biden has already said he's not walking out that door without a deal. So I suppose I will be walking away with Joe Biden and she will be having a great night. My wife will be very upset, but Joe Biden is going to get his infrastructure deal. I'm trying to point out how ridiculous and stupid the idea that bipartisanship is the highest aspiration of an objective. And fact of the matter is for people to say, oh, he didn't have a choice. Stripping away the filibuster and running with the idea that I am going to get my agenda accomplished hell or high water because 600,000 people died. This is not normal. 30 million people have been infected with a virus. This is not normal. The government has failed. I'm Joe Biden. I'm going to fix this shit. That's also a particular political position that a person could have taken. That position makes the American public and getting accomplishment done as the highest objective. And using whatever you need to do, including COVID itself and the deaths of those 600,000 people as a reason and a rationale for doing so. Yes, I would goddamn do that. You should do that. That is kind of a point on some level in getting in office during this particular era. That's not what's happening. I'm seeing a weak-voiced wisp of a man who wanted, supposedly, $4 trillion in spending. Because, again, 600,000 Americans have dropped fucking dead. That this wisp of a man is now coming out with Republicans as if there's been some accomplishment and saying, we've reached a framework for an agreement. Now, the catch here is Republicans said they wanted to basically fuck over America to pay for this by raising a gas tax. Now, you can understand that the people who are going to basically use gas to get home and work to every day, many of those people poor, many of those people just like my mom, not making $15 an hour, something else that Joe Biden has also failed miserably on, betrayed America on, the Republicans wanted a gas tax. We want to fuck America. That's what we want to do. We don't want to have to pay for this. We don't want the wealthy to pay for it. They're putting money in our pocket to prevent the wealthy from having to pay for anything. And so the question becomes, how did Joe Biden get this deal? What did Republicans agree on? Is there going to be a gas tax? What's going to be in this bill? And it's not $3 trillion. It's not $2 trillion. It's not even $1 trillion. It's 956 billion. 53 billion. Is a framework for it. No new taxes, apparently, according to Rob Portman. And it's $559 billion in new spending. Now, the question becomes, all right, now what? Now, what they're saying is they're going to try to pass something big using budget reconciliation later on. And look, whether or not the budget reconciliation stuff gets through and everything else, budget reconciliation, apparently, they probably can do that. They would have to get Joe Manchin on board for that. They would have to get many of the other people on, like the Kristen Sinema, on board for that. And again, this is Democrats basically negotiating with themselves. And also, there are limits on what people can do or what they can do in regards to budget reconciliation. I'm making a point here, though, that this is very, very small in the context of what is taking place now. they were having these backdoor meetings, apparently 5 Democrats, 5 Republicans. And in these 5 Democrats, 5 Republicans coming up with their ideas on this, of course, they have to get 60, right? And that means that it's always at the lowest common denominator in regards to Republicans, if indeed you want to be held to the thing of the filibuster, which they did not have to do. Now, I am not necessarily saying that Joe Biden has complete and utter control over Semina or Manchin or some of the other people that are more skeptical about the filibuster issue. But I do say that as president, you have the bully pulpit. And with the bully pulpit, especially if you have a public of Democrats that basically agree with you and consider Joe Manchin somewhat of a pariah, yes, that is a tool thing in your toolkit. And if you this idea of consequences later on, you're Joe Biden. You're not going to be in office for more than 4 years. What do you care? Your job is to get stuff accomplished. But that is not where Joe Biden is. That is not the person that he is. And so you get this. Pelosi made the point. She says, I welcome the bipartisan package, but it must be paired with the president's bigger goals now that Congress and call for a budget reconciliation package later. Meaning you're going to have to do both packages. Meaning if Republicans are going to be okay, yeah, you're going to have to be okay with both. And what was taking place was something weird politics. You had this thing of this fight over, all right, well, we have power over this, but we don't have power over that. So we're going to use our power over this to affect this power over that. Where, like, it's hard to explain. It's like the House and the Senate were in this kind of weird back and forth in regards to distrusting one another. It's very strange. That said, especially Joe Manchin, because the House has been sending stuff over that Joe Manchin has basically been disagreeing with. So right here, the major hurdle for the bipartisan agreement has been financing. Biden demanded no new taxes on anyone making less than $40,000. Republicans were unwilling to raise taxes beyond steps of indexing gasoline. The senators departed from the White House on Thursday with a sense of confidence that the funding issue had been addressed. In fact, I don't think it was $4 trillion. I think Biden won $2 trillion on this one. I could be wrong. Susan Collins, one of the lawmakers who met with Biden, one of the 21 senators that negotiated a package, so the group had reached an agreement on the price tag, the scope of the bill, and how it would be paid for. So the question is, what is that agreement? What is that agreement? And either way, I make the point of saying, look, in the context of the time frame that we're in, with all of these people that have died, I mean, for God's sake, we're still wearing masks when we're going into the various places. And you would think that there will be more emphasis on this notion of, all right, yes, we need to have some level of reparations for the American public because of what has taken place over the past year. Some recognition of that, some acknowledgement of that. I would hope that it even went deeper to somewhat of an analysis of, hey, why were there all those protests beyond just the cops killing people? What is it about those particular communities that may have that many cops in those particular communities? All sorts of questions, but none of that stuff have seemed to take place. None of it. None of it at all. We're back to basically normal politics, despite the fact that last year, 600,000 people have died and 500 people are still dying a day from COVID. It is very weird. It is very bizarre. I want to also point out the idea that this is not normal. None of this is normal. And honestly, this hasn't been normal for a very long time. And I know people can say, well, dude, normal is relative. And because normal is relative for the normal, period that we're in, it is normal. But I thought about that, and the answer is still no, that's not normal. What I mean by that is everything that gets passed basically ends up taking 60 votes in the Senate. Doesn't matter what it is. For all intents and purposes, short of rape is wrong, and you'll get 58 senators, one person doesn't do, and another person objects to maybe even the framing of it, something like that. Short of stuff like that, everything basically needs 60 votes. That is not the way the Senate is supposed to work. And what I mean by that, they're using the filibuster going back for 40 years at this point, whenever they changed the filibuster over where you could be multiple tracks and everything else. And you could just sit down and do it as opposed to standing up. Once they started messing around with the filibuster rules, making it easier to use. But even with the filibuster being easier to use, it is still not normal, meaning with everything right now as is, you should still get the majority of your votes to be 51 win, 49 lose. Why wouldn't you get the majority of the votes to be that way? Why is everything an emergency? Have you noticed that? We gotten to the point where we accept, all right, everything is on fire, everything is fine. Because you've been standing in the fire for so long, sometimes you forget the fact that it's a fire. It is very weird and bizarre to have a situation where you have a political system that says 51 votes win, 49 votes lose. There is a loophole, however, that you can use in case of emergencies for the minority to not be ignored. And the minority in this situation just said, all right, everything is an emergency. Everything is an emergency. Doesn't matter what it is. Emergency. It basically says, fuck America. How does it not? If the Constitution or this country was put together in a way where you have all of these multiple parties and everything else, but the highest priority within the context of those parties was America, well, the fact that the priority was America mattered more than the individual wants and needs of the individual people that were involved in the process and the individual parties themselves. Think about what I'm saying. What I'm saying is right. It's flat fact true. The fact of the Constitution of America, you have 320 million people, and all of those people, for the most part, sign fealty and allegiance to the flag, or at the very least, the Constitution, a mythical thing. The fact that human beings can believe in mythical things is, on some level, the reason that human beings can organize themselves under these kind of massive banners. And in the context of the massive banner, that's kind of the point that I'm getting at. That is supposed to be the point. That is supposed to be the highest thing. That's the thing that you're not necessarily supposed to get above, especially if you're functioning in a political system. And that political system is basically the mechanics and the machinery of that icon. No, it's not real. Doesn't matter. The political parties have gotten to the point of saying, it's not real. We know it's not real, but we will pretend it is for everybody else. And they will organize themselves under this thing that we know is not real. And not only do we know it's not real, we're not even going to behave as if it's real. And so the things that we do, the machinations, our political objectives and ambitions is going to matter more than that. And not just matter more than that. It matters more than that because we get kickback in the terms of money, cash, the positions that we get when we get out of office, meaning revolving door. If we do good by the people who are either on Wall Street, Silicon Valley, or what are these other companies and industries, they will bring us into their fold when I leave. My kids will have a job in those industries. Soft money will flow to me. Money would not go to my opponents. There's all sorts of advantages and incentives built into the process for those people when they're working within the context of this particular system. Hence, everything is an emergency. We need to go to the mat on everything. My point is that the only way you get a system like that where it's so fucking broken, where everything requires 60 votes because each and every person within the context of the political party's function is, we got to go to the mat for everything on this case, is because they don't give a shit about the higher objective anymore. At that point, it's just raw politics of who can win and take what in terms of power. Now, if you're functioning in a system like that, and you know you function in a system like that, that is fucking horrendous, and yet you are where you are. The wild part is, you get people like Manchin and people like Semina, who I really, truly believe just don't want to do shit, and don't want to be pushed for shit, and honestly just don't agree that people should have these things in a way that, they're talking about. Meaning when they're saying, yeah, we disagree with this bill, they totally disagree with this bill. From the standpoint of the filibuster, though, that probably has more to do with we don't want to get anything done, that people putting money in our pockets don't want us to get rid of that. Because if we get rid of filibuster, it becomes easier to actually deliver for the American public, and the American public will expect you to. Because the hurdle by which to get those legislation passed is different. I would wager to you, in a system like that, you would have more Democrats that will not be backing the policies that you think they potentially back. Meaning, when people say, oh, we can get that passed, I doubt it. Seriously doubt it. You have a lot of people who say, I back something purely because they know it can never pass. The moment that you get rid of the filibuster, the politics of that and the fundamentals of that change. They don't want to change the system. The whole point of not getting anything done is a benefit and a bonus to those in power. It's just shocking, that's all, when you really look at it from this notion of, well, how is it supposed to work versus how is it working? And in the way that it is working, is it doing what it's supposed to do for the American public? Well, no, the answer is no. Absolutely not. This, with Joe Biden coming out with this press conference, is not success. This is not success. This is peeling down a bill to the lowest common denominator. It's not about America's interests. And it is even unclear how this is going to be paid for, since Portman basically said there are no new taxes.
Good afternoon. If you hear a little noise in the background, it's because I'm supposed to be getting on a helicopter to head to North Carolina. Go with our friends, the bipartisan group of senators. I said many times before, there's nothing our nation can't do when we decide to do it together, do it as one nation. Today is the latest example of that truth, in my view. I'm pleased to report that a bipartisan group of senators, 5 Democrats, 5 Republicans, part of a larger group, has come together and forged an agreement that will create millions of American jobs and modernize our American infrastructure to compete with the rest of the world and own the 21st century. I want to thank them for working together and for raising their ideas and concerns with me and with the Vice President, as well as with our jobs cabinet. Secretary Buttigieg is here. Good to see you, Mr. Secretary.
I'm not going to play the entirety of this speech. And in fact, I'm not even going to go further with this. Listen at your leisure. He gets to the point of talking about autarky and democracy versus autarky, as if he's having this political, this philosophical argument in an infrastructure package. And I sat here thinking to myself, what the fuck are you talking about? What are you talking about? What are you talking about? The only thing that matters in this is, what are you delivering for the American public? Look, what China and Russia does. And there is something to be said that we have woefully neglected this country. Woefully so. Bridges collapsing. There was just a bridge that collapsed in DC recently, the other day. And so, yeah, woefully neglected. Which means that your focus and your emphasis need to be here. And within the context of your emphasis here, you will better modernize this country to compete. But this is not a philosophical discussion about authoritarianism in the way that you call it versus whatever the fuck you want to call this. That's not that. Your focus may be on that. That may be in your head. But that's not the reality of what Americans are dealing with. Are you going to invest in this country or not? Are you going to increase taxes on the wealthy or not? Are you going to increase taxes on the poor, which is what gas is? It's basically a tax on consumption, on your ability to get from point A to point B. The catch is, you don't have a choice for that tax. It's like healthcare. You don't have a choice for that particular tax. Well, how are you going to pay for it? How are you going to pay for it, Joe Biden? That's the thing that's interesting. And look, as I'm looking through it and everything else, I guess the point is, it's not even $1 trillion. It's not even $1 trillion. And half of that, I guess you can say, is spending. And then the question becomes, okay, how are you going to pay for it? The spending. Like, share, subscribe. Thanks all.